Go for broke! Go! Make on the make! Go for broke!
Go for Broke was the slogan of the 442 Regimental Combat Team, which embodied their bravery, determination, and willingness to give everything they had. The 442 was an infantry regiment in the U.S. Army comprised mostly of Japanese American men. It was authorized by President Roosevelt on February 1, 1943 during World War II, after an experimental unit formed of Japanese Americans known as the 100th Infantry Battalion proved successful. These infantries were later combined to form one unit. When the War Department announced the activation of the 442, over 10,000 Japanese Americans from Hawaii signed up.
They all wanted to join. See, at first, they wouldn't let us join because they thought we were the enemy.
They were shipped to the mainland where they met up with several thousand other Nisei, or second-generation Japanese Americans, from all over the United States. They were later deployed throughout Europe.
Went to Italy, went to France, went back to Italy. Some guys went to Germany.
Though they were smaller in stature, the Japanese Americans were courageous. In enlisting, they took the matter of proving themselves into their own hands by endangering their lives when they could have let America fight without them.
They were able to prove their loyalty in war and offer their lives as a sacrifice for redemption.
The 442's impact on the war was great, as they engaged in deadly combat in the European theater and were always ready to defend America, exuding a rare level of courage and fighting spirit. One of their greatest missions was the rescue of the Lost Battalion, which took place in France in 1944. They rescued the 141st Texas Regiment and fought for 6 days, suffering over 160 casualties to save 211 men. This is one of the greatest examples of the Japanese Americans' patriotism, courage, and resolve to fight for their country. As further verification of their dedication and valor, Japanese Americans would also help win the war in the Pacific as interpreters and translators in the Military Intelligence Service against Japan. Thus, although they were hated by the country they loved, the 442 took a stand to prove their true patriotism and loyalty through heroism and self-sacrifice, despite the discrimination towards the Japanese in America. While their families were unjustly incarcerated, they chose to fight for the country that was rejecting their race, significantly contributing to the victory of the Allied powers. With the lives of over 600 and the wounds of over 3,000 men. At the time of the 442's formation, the bombing of Pearl Harbor had already affected Japanese American life.
Before the war started, we thought we was friends with everybody. When the war started, oh, they looked at us in a different way. It wasn't a good time of our lives.
However, even before Pearl Harbor, Americans, especially those in the mainland, had developed an anti-Asian attitude due to things like jealousy over Asians taking the jobs which they saw as exclusive to the long-standing population. This attitude led to things like the United States Supreme Court declaring Japanese aliens ineligible to citizenship. Anti-Japanese statements, including the racial slur Japs, appeared all over towns, in shop windows, newspapers, and speeches. The hatred of Japanese Americans turned into blind and senseless fear as accusations spread of Japanese spies within America.
We looked like them, you know, although we were different.
This hatred led to President Roosevelt issuing Executive Order 9066, which authorized the relocation of Japanese Americans to internment camps. However, in Hawaii, the Japanese Americans constituted a larger percent of the population than in the mainland, where the discrimination was more severe, as they were a smaller minority. Therefore, Japanese in Hawaii could not be completely interned, as their large numbers made it difficult to find room to lock them up, and their numerous jobs including plantation work and education made them crucial contributors to the Hawaiian economy.
On the mainland, about 110,000 to 120,000, or the entire Japanese population, was moved away from the west coast.
The Japanese in the mainland and Hawaii were sent to the camps without trials, hearings, or process of law. They were forcibly taken from their homes, and locked up like criminals simply because of their ethnicity. At the camps, starvation and a lack of medical care caused much suffering. Though they were told the camps were for their own safety, the guns were always pointed at them. Along with being interned, many Japanese American businesses were shut down and their lands were taken from them without their knowledge or consent. They were stripped of their invaluable possessions, which would later be sold. Having to fight while family members were detained in internment camps was a difficult aspect for members of the 442. Challenges also arose because of suspicion of their dedication to America from their superiors and discrimination by almost everyone surrounding them.
We went among the family soldiers. They looked down on us.
But they still chose to risk their lives even though the country they were fighting for had stripped them of their invaluable possessions.
They came back from the war, even though there were some of them that still experienced racial discrimination, and as a unit, they all proved that they were loyal Americans.
Following the war, the 442 became the most decorated unit in the history of the U.S. military for its size and length of service, as they received numerous awards. With the receiving of awards and recognition, soldiers coming home received a hero's welcome and became respected as the realization of their actions to defend America spread.
I share the proudness of these guys that volunteered, especially for the mainland boys, that the parents were in concentration camp and yet they were out there fighting for their country.
In addition, as President Truman awarded them with the Presidential Unit Citation, he told them,
"You fought not only the enemy, but you fought prejudice, and you've won. Keep up that fight, and we'll continue to win. We'll make this great republic stand for just what its Constitution says it stands for, the welfare of all the people, all the time."
The 442 also helped America to realize their wrongdoings, which the U.S. government tried to make up for through the H.R. 442 Civil Liberties Act of 1987, paying internees $20,000. Another one of the great influences the 442 had was on politics in Hawaii.
In Hawaii, the Japanese were able to usurp the power and create a big Democratic Party.
Against the primarily Republican rule, many veterans took on leadership roles, sparking the Hawaii Democratic Revolution of 1954, which helped to convince Congress to allow Hawaii to become a state. Many veterans entered public offices. To this day, Hawaii is still a predominantly Democratic state. Additionally, the veterans came back from the war with a changed self-perception and would no longer accept being treated as second-class citizens. Similar to current-day problems like gender inequality and racism against different minority groups, they advocated for the rights they deserved as American citizens, and through recognizing these and taking action, they represent the struggle of minorities for equality.
They volunteered and showed their true loyalty, and that's the only reason why we have more privileges and they accept us as American, not as a Japanese.
Therefore, even with the demeaning actions and hateful attitudes in America, the Japanese Americans took a stand to prove their loyalty as true American citizens.
They took a stand as individuals, as members of their community, and as Americans to not only support America, but to prove their loyalty. They were fighting against racism and in the end established themselves as worthy citizens.
However, the 442 did more than just prove themselves and other Japanese Americans. In taking a stand against racism directed towards them, they showed and exemplified the very definition of being American. That it's not in your ethnicity or your looks or your skin. It's in your values, beliefs, and actions.